So it looks like I've finally gotten the lizard from the Marvel Legends Spider-Man Retro Card Collection. But is this one any good, soulmates, and is he worth getting? Be sure you stick around, soulmates, because we're going to talk about what Spider-Man characters we want to see on the retro card next. If you support what I do, please click subscribe and hit the bell for notifications so you don't miss a single video of mine when it comes out. So naturally, I had a pretty tough time getting the lizard because he's a Wal-Mart exclusive, as we all know, and a lot of you are having issues getting him too, but I did get lucky and I was able to get one. And well, there's not much to say about the way he's packaged. It's pretty standard stuff, and he comes with some decent accessories on this one. He comes with his tail, of course, which is a separate piece that you put on a little peg on the back of him. Besides that, he also comes with a more modern style head that has a monstrous, fearsome look to it. And he also comes with a set of extra hands as well as a couple of science beakers. All in all, I gotta say that the accessories on this one feel like they amount to a pretty good package. Of course, the thing that I think everyone is wondering about is how well does the tail work on the lizard? And the answer to that is, well, it works fairly well, because when you attach it to the peg on his back, it feels kind of flimsy sometimes, but also it stays on pretty well. It doesn't come off super easily unless you really try to get it off. And besides that, it's all pretty standard stuff for a tail with a bendy wire in it. And of course, because it is a bendy wire, I would recommend that you guys don't pose it too much, because if you overpose it, well, we've all seen what happens to action figures that have bendy wires in them. Then they eventually break. Aside from that, the sculpt on this action figure is a thing of beauty, because looking at the tail, you see that it's got all kinds of scales and ridges sculpted on there, and the entire action figure indeed is a brand new sculpt. And I did say that I thought this looked a lot like Steve Ditko's artwork, but looking at him a little closer, I think it might actually be a lot more accurate to say that it looks more like John Romita's version of the lizard. Now, the difference between his version of the lizard and the one that we see here is that the colors and paint apps that we're seeing on this lizard are more in line with what we see from Spider-Man the Animated Series, because the colors that we see on Spider-Man the Animated Series feature a lizard that appears more teal than green. Also, the purple color that we see on the pants of this action figure is muted and darker than what we see in the comics, where it's more of a bright purple and it looks more lively. These seem like minor things, but they are little touches that add up to the big picture of a character's design. Does it necessarily negatively affect this action figure? Well, I don't think so, because a lot of these Marvel Legends like this tend to be more of an interpretation, where it's more of a mishmash of stuff over the character's history than it is necessarily a specific version of that character. And well, this version of the lizard is very obviously a combination of the animated series as well as the classic lizard we all know. Let's move aside from the design for a moment and talk about the rest of his accessories, because the hands are very notable here. They are all different, and the hands that he comes with include a hand that looks like it's wide open as though he's bracing himself on a surface, a hand that looks like it's clenching up a little bit, a hand that's partially closed so it could hold an item, and then another hand that's just a fist. Obviously, these hands are very exciting because they allow the lizard to do all kinds of different things, all the way from holding the beakers in one of his hands so he can drink whatever concoction he's whipped up, or holding Spider-Man by an arm if he really wants to. You can fit Spider-Man's arm in one of those hands very easily, easily to even holding Spider-Man up and restraining him while the lizard does whatever he's doing. Besides that, let's talk about the extra head that the lizard comes with. He comes with a modern style head that I really don't care for that much. I don't even think it's a bad head sculpt. I just think that the design is a little too much for this action figure. But I feel like the other one, the classic version, is a much better fit for this action figure. I don't know why, but I feel like this modern head sculpt is kind of out of place. Maybe it's the way the scales look on it versus what we see on the sculpt of his body, and I feel like the classic head fits in a lot better, but it just isn't really working for me all that well. Moving on, let's talk about the articulation of the lizard, because this is a very modern style Marvel Legend on this one, and some of the notable pieces of articulation, of course, is the torso rocker with the ab crunch, which is the more modern style that we're kind of getting ourselves eased into over the next few years. And I do like it a lot better than the waist swivel and ab crunch. I feel it looks much more natural, and I'm glad to see it here. And something else that kind of surprised me on this one is that he has a whole neck piece that moves along with his head. That really surprised me, but I don't mind it because it adds a lot of variation into how we can pose the lizard's head. A couple of other things that really surprised me about the lizard's articulation were his feet, because once you get down to the end of his pants, his legs are just attached like they're boots almost to the leg pieces, and you can rotate them. There's articulation there at the calf, and that's something I'm sort of used to on a few Marvel Legends, but a lot of Marvel Legends don't really have that anymore, so it was kind of surprising to see. Still, I'm not going to say no to it, and I'm not complaining, I just thought it was interesting. Now, the one part of his foot articulation that I didn't like was that it was very difficult to get him so that he was in crouching poses, because the feet don't move forward past like a 90-degree angle here, and that really limits what the lizard can do. I was actually really surprised to see this, because I was expecting to be able to get the lizard into all kinds of charging positions, or get him into a crouching position, or even make him look like he's crawling on stuff, because, you know, the lizard does that a lot. But no, he just has that 90-degree sticking point on his ankles, and that kind of bothers me. It wouldn't have been so bad if he had maybe toe articulation, because that would have made it a little easier to get him to do some things. But he doesn't have toe articulation, so it kind of hampers what he otherwise, I think, should be able to do. Now, of course, because we're talking about the articulation, I'm sure a lot of people are really curious about this, and you're probably asking, well, how does he move with that plastic lab coat on? And well, that is a valid question, because when we get plastic clothing on an action figure, sometimes it can hinder the articulation, but I'm very pleased to report here that the articulation is just fine with his lab coat. The lab coat is made of a very pliable plastic, so he can move anywhere he wants very easily. Perhaps the only difficulty you might find with the articulation and the lab coat is that his upper body might not go all the way back with the lab coat in place, but otherwise, I don't think it's a problem. I think he moves around just fine. So if you've been on the fence about the lizard because of the lab coat and you wish it was fabric or soft goods or whatever, don't let that stop you on this one. Don't sleep on this one because of the plastic lab coat. Perhaps the only real shortcoming I can think of on this one are the ankle joints that I just mentioned, and perhaps the balance, but you know, A little bit of off-kilter balance is to be expected with an action figure that has a literal tail on it. And, well, that tail does help the toy balance a little bit when you're posing him. Of course, it is very possible to get the lizard posed so that he's whipping his tail at Spider-Man, and it's a little bit harder than it would have been if we had more range in the ankles, but I was definitely able to do it, and I got some pretty good-looking situations out of it. Well, now that we've seen the Lizard Soulmates, what Marvel Legend do we want to see next for the Spider-Man Retro Card series? Well, obviously, the most obvious answer of all is Dr. Octopus. I want to see Dr. Octopus, and I really don't care how I get him, whether it's Armani suit Dr. Octopus or whether it's his animated series design. All I really want to see is a Dr. Octopus that has the bendy tentacles on it, because the one that we got, quote unquote we got, is not really Dr. Octopus. If he doesn't have bendy tentacles, or at least articulated tentacles, then it's not really Dr. Octopus. Well, Soulmates, what do you think of this Marvel Legends Spider-Man Retro Card Lizard? Is this one that you want for your collection now? Are you thinking about getting him? Are you still on the fence because maybe there's something that's stopping you from getting him, but you still kind of want him? Or is this one that you just feel like skipping now altogether? I don't know, guys. Let me know what you think down in the comments, and let me know what Spider-Man character you want to see as a retro card release next. If you'd like to see my Marvel Legends Amazing Fantasy 15 Spider-Man review, you can check out that video here, Soulmates.